All right, guys, so I wanted to make this little radical review notes for you guys so that we didn't necessarily have to sit down and I lecture about it the whole time, especially if you already know this stuff, because it should mostly be review. Okay, so talking about simplifying radicals. When we simplify radicals, we build branches, okay, and we're always looking for the biggest perfect square that comes out of it. So in this case, 16 would be the biggest perfect square. So then 48 divided by 16 would give us 3. Radical 16 then becomes 4. So then our answer for simplifying radical 48 would be 4 radical 3. Okay, same idea works when we have numbers outside. Okay, we just have to keep in mind that that number on the outside is still there. So then 98, biggest perfect square that goes into that is 49. Goes into it twice. Radical 49 will then become 7. Okay, now we have 7 as a whole number, 3 as a whole number, so 3 times 7, radical 2. Radical 2 just gets dropped down. And then we get 21 radical 2 as our final answer. And that's how you would simplify radicals. Next, let's take a look at multiplying radicals. When we multiply radicals, things inside of radicals are allowed to multiply together. So we'd write big radical, 8 times 3, give us radical 24, and then we always have to simplify, guys. So radical 4, radical 6, radical 4 then becomes 2. Final answer would be 2 radical 6. Next, we're going to look at one with numbers on the outside. When we have this, the numbers on the outside get multiplied together. The numbers on the inside get multiplied together. So outside the radical times outside the radical, inside the radical times inside the radical. So that's 2 times 3 times radical 2 times 6. So that would give us 6 radical 12. Simplifying again would be radical 4 and radical 3, 2. 6 and 2 are on the outside, so then we get 12 radical 3. Radical 3 comes from right there. So that's how you would multiply radicals. The next one I want to look at is dividing radicals, also known as rationalizing the denominator. Okay, this is something that we'll use a couple times this year, and it'll show up randomly, and you'll be like, oh yeah, I remember how to do that. Okay, so rationalizing the denominator. In order to do this, we have to get this radical out of the bottom. The best way to do that is to make it a perfect square. The easiest way to make it a perfect square, multiply it by itself, right? That's going to give us radical 100 in the bottom. Let's talk about what we have to multiply the top by. If I multiply the bottom by radical 10, I also have to do it to the top. So that's going to give us 2 radical 10 in the top. The reason we're allowed to do that is because radical 10 divided by radical 10 is just 1. And we can take any number, multiply it by 1, and it'll still give us the same value out. Okay, so then, simplifying this, we have 2 radical 10, radical 100 becomes 10, 2 and 10 are going to simplify, so that gives us radical 10 divided by 5. That's how we'd rationalize the denominator. And then lastly, let's look at solving with radicals. So if we're going to solve with radicals, it always is some kind of x, and it's usually being squared, solving with radicals. So then we would square root both sides. That would give us the absolute value of x equals 2. Okay, the reason we put absolute value is because this x value right here can be either positive or negative. It doesn't matter. So then we say x is equal to positive or negative 2. Okay, we don't need to split it up like we were doing earlier when we were solving for absolute value. Right, and this works because whenever we plug stuff back in, we always plug it in parentheses. So it would be negative 2 squared would give us 4. So we get 2 solutions, right? Let's take a look at this one. A little bit more work to be involved in this one. So before we can take the square root, we have to get this by itself. So we divide by 2 on both sides. It's going to give us x plus 2 squared equals 12. Now we can square root because it's by itself, right? The square root and the square cancel. X plus 2, absolute value, equals, and then we're going to have to simplify it eventually, so why not right now? Radical 4, radical 3 gives us 2, so that's 2 radical 3. Earlier when we had absolute values equal something, I made you split it up. I'm not going to make you split it up anymore. Now we can just say x plus 2 equals plus or minus 2 radical 3. And then to finish this, we just subtract 2. So that's x equals negative 2 plus or minus 2 radical 3. And that's two solutions because of this sign right here, right? So one solution would be negative 2 plus 2 radical 3. The other solution would be negative 2 minus 2 radical 3. Okay, so that's where we get the two solutions from the plus or minus sign. So then that would be our final answer. If you have any questions about any of this, please ask me. Okay, yeah, sweet.